There was once upon a time a fisherman who lived close by a palace, and he fished for the king's table. One day he was out fishing, and he caught nothing at all. No matter what trick he tried with rod and line, he could not even get as much as a bite on his hook. But when the day was almost over, a head rose out of the water and said, "If you will give me what your wife shows you when you go home, you shall catch fish enough." So the man said yes, and then he caught fish aplenty. But when he went home that night, his wife showed him their baby which had just been born, and fell a weeping and wailing when he told her of the promise which he had made. He too was very unhappy. All this was soon heard by the king at the palace, and when he heard what sorrow the woman was in and the reason of it, he said that he himself would take the child and see if he could not save it. The baby was a boy, and the king took him to his palace and brought him up as his own son until the lad grew up. Then one day he begged for permission to go out with his father to fish. He had a strong desire to do so, he said. The king was very unwilling at first, but eventually he gave way. He stayed with his father, and all went prosperously and well with them the whole day, until they came back to land in the evening. Then the lad found that he had lost his pocket handkerchief, and he would go out in the boat after it. But no sooner had he got into the boat than it began to move, and he could do nothing, no matter how hard he rowed. The boat went on and on through the whole night, and at last he came to a white strand that lay far, far away. There he landed, and when he walked on for some distance, he met an old man with a long white beard. "What is the name of this country?" asked the youth. "Whiteland," answered the man. And then he begged the youth to tell him where he had come from, and where he was going, and what he was going to do. And the youth did so. "Well then," said the man, "if you walk a little farther along the seashore, you will come to 3 princesses who are standing in the earth so that their heads alone are out of it. Then the first of them will call you. She is the eldest, and she will beg you very prettily to come to her and to help her. And the second will do the same, but you must not go near either of them. Hurry past, as if you neither saw them nor heard them, but you must go to the third and do whatever she bids you, and it will bring you good fortune." When the youth had come to the first princess, she called to him, and she begged him to come to her very prettily, but he walked past as if he did not hear or see her. And then the same with the second, but he went up to the third. "If you will do what I ask of thee, thou shalt choose among us 3, said the princess. So the lad said that he was most willing, and she told him that 3 trolls had planted all 3 of them in the earth, but that before they had dwelt in a castle which he could see at some distance in the wood. Now go to the castle and let the trolls beat you 1 night for each of us, and if you can endure, you will set us free." "Yes," answered the lad, "I will certainly try to do so." "When you go in," continued the princess, "2 lions will stand by the doorway, but if you go straight between them, they will do you no harm. Go straight into a small dark chamber, and there lie down. Then the troll will come and beat thee, but you shall take the flask which is hanging on the wall and anoint yourself wherever he wounded you, after which you shall be as well as before. Then lay hold of the sword which is hanging by the side of the flask, and smite the troll dead." So he did what the princess told him. He walked straight in between the lions, just as if he did not see them, and then he went into a small chamber and lay down on the bed. The first night a troll came with 3 heads and 3 rods, and beat the lad most unmercifully, but he held out until the troll was done, and then he took the flask and rubbed himself, And having done this, he grabbed the sword, and he smote the troll dead. In the morning, when he went to the seashore, the princesses were out of the earth as far as their waists. The next night everything happened in the same way, but the troll who came that night had 6 heads and 6 rods, and he beat him much more severely than the first had done. But when the lad endured and went out of doors the next morning, the princesses were out of the earth as far as their knees. On the 3rd night a troll came in who had 9 heads and 9 rods, and he struck the lad, and he flogged him so long that he fainted. So the troll picked him up and flung him against the wall, and this made the flask of ointment fall down, and it splashed all over him, and he became as strong as ever. Then, without any loss of time, he grabbed the sword and he struck the troll dead. And in the morning, when he went out of the castle, the princesses were standing there entirely out of the earth. So he took the youngest for his queen, and he lived very happily with her for a long time. At last, however, he took an idea that he would like to go home for a short while to see his parents. His queen did not like this, but when his longing grew so great that he told her he must and would go, she said to him, "Promise me one thing, and that is to do whatever thy father bids thee to do, but not what thy mother bids thee." And this he promised. So she gave him a ring, which enabled him who wore it to obtain 2 wishes. He wished himself at home, and instantly he found himself there. But his parents were so amazed at the splendor of his apparel that their wonder never ceased. When he had been at home for some days, his mother wanted him to go up to the palace and show himself to the king, for she wanted the king to see what a great man he had become. The father said, "No, no, he must not do that, for if he does, we shall have no more delight in him on this visit." But he spoke in vain, for the mother pestered until the son went. When he arrived, he was more splendid, both in raiment and in all else, than the other king. And the other king did not like it, and he said, "Well, you can see what kind of queen mine is, but I can't see yours. I do not believe you have such pretty a queen as I do." "Oh, I would to heaven she were standing here, and then you would be able to see," said the young king, and in an instant she was standing there. But she was very sorrowful, and she said to him, "Why didn't you remember my words, and listen only to what thy father said? Now must I go home again at once, and thou hast wasted both of the wishes." Then she tied a ring in her hair which had her name upon it, and wished herself home again. And now the young king was deeply affected, and day in and day out he could think of nothing else but how to get back to his queen. "I will try to see if there's any place where I can learn how to find Whiteland," he thought, and he journeyed off into the world. When he had gone some distance, he came to a mountain, where he met a man who was lord over all the beasts of the forest, for they all came to him when he blew a horn which he had. So the king asked where Whiteland was. "I do not know that," he answered, "but I will ask my beasts." Then he blew his horn, and he inquired whether any of them knew where Whiteland lay, but there was not one who did. So the man gave him a pair of snowshoes. "When you have these on," he said, "you will come to my brother, who lives hundreds of miles from here. He is lord over all the birds in the air. Ask him. When you have got there, just turn the shoes so that the toes point this way, and then they will come home again, quite of their own accord." And when the king had arrived there, he turned the shoes as the lord of the beasts had bidden him, and they went back. And now he once more asked about Whiteland, and the man summoned all the birds together, and inquired if any of them knew where Whiteland lay. No, none knew this. Long after the others, there came an old eagle. He had been absent for 10 whole years, but he too knew no more about Whiteland than the rest. "Well, well," said the man. "Well, I will give you loan of a pair of snowshoes of mine. If you wear them, you will get to my brother who lives hundreds of miles from here. He is lord of all the fish in the sea. You can ask him, but do not forget to turn the shoes around so they come back to me." The king thanked him, put on the shoes, and when he had got to him who was lord over all the fish in the sea, he turned the snowshoes around, and back they went, just as the others had gone, and he asked once more where Whiteland was. The man called all the fish together with his horn, but none of them knew anything about Whiteland. At last came an old pike, which he had great difficulty in bringing home to him. When he asked the pike, it said, "Yes, Whiteland is well known to me. I have been cook there for 10 years. Tomorrow morning I have to go back, for the queen is getting married again, as the king has been gone a long time." "If that be the case, I will give you a piece of advice," said the man. "Not far from here is a moor. On it stands 3 brothers who have stood there 100 years, fighting for a hat, a cloak, and a pair of boots. If anyone has these 3 things, he can make himself invisible, and if he desires to go any place, he has but to wish, and he is there. Tell them that you have a desire to try these things, and that way you will be able to decide which of the men is to have them." The king thanked him and went and did what he said. "What is it that you are fighting about for ever and ever?" said he to the brothers. "Let us make a trial of these things, and then I will judge between you." They willingly consented to this idea, but when he got the hat and the cloak and the boots, he said, "Next time we meet, you will have my decision," and hereupon he wished himself away. While he was going quickly through the air, he fell in with the north wind. "And where may you be going?" asked the north wind. "To Whiteland," said the king, and then he related what had happened to him. "Well," said the north wind, "you can easily get there quicker than I can, for I have to puff and blow in every corner. But when you get there, place yourself on the stairs by the side of the door, and then I will come blustering in, as if I want to blow the whole castle down. And when the prince, who is to have your queen, comes to see what is astir, just take him by the throat and fling him out, and then I will carry him far away from court." As the north wind had said, so the king did. He stood on the stairs, and when the north wind came howling and roaring and caught the roof and the walls of the castle till they shook, the prince went out to see what was happening. But as soon as he came, the king took him and flung him out of the castle, and then the north wind took hold of him and carried him away. And when he was rid of him, the king went into the castle. At first the queen did not know him, because he had grown so thin and pale from having traveled so long and so sorrowfully. But when she saw the ring, she was glad, and then the rightful wedding was held, and held in such a way that it was talked about far and wide.